Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really fascinating and honestly pretty complex topic, the possibility of a hidden mathematical structure, a secret code embedded deep within the Quran.
I mean, just think about that for a second. What if those codes create this incredible harmony between faith and numbers? It's a wild idea, right? That a book, revered for centuries, could have these layers of mathematical genius that we're only now starting to uncover with our modern tools. And that's really the core mystery we're going to dig into today.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to talk about a key concept called ijaz. It basically means miraculousness. You see, for believers, this is the quality that makes the Quran impossible to imitate. And for a long time, people thought of this in terms of its language, its incredible linguistic beauty. But now, people are looking at it differently. They're exploring its numbers, its structure, and asking a really interesting question. What if there's a mathematical miracle right there alongside the literary one?
All right, let's get right into it. Section 1. Where do we even begin looking for a hidden mathematical code?
Now, the goal here is not just, plucking numbers out of thin air. Researchers are looking for objective, verifiable patterns. We're talking about things you can actually count and calculate, stuff that anyone can check, like the number of chapters, which are called surahs, and the verses within them. And the big question, the so what of all this, is whether these patterns, if they hold up, actually point to some kind of divine design.
So how does this actually work? What are these patterns? Well, in this next section, we're going to look at some of the most famous examples researchers have found. You can think of them as the key exhibits in this whole investigation.
Okay, so it all kicks off with the basic structure of the Quran itself. It's got 114 chapters, or surahs. Now, researchers split these into two main groups. You have 29 chapters that are called muqatta'at. These are special because they begin with these mysterious individual letters. And then you have the other 85 chapters that don't have these letters. So remember that split, 85 and 29. It's the foundation for everything we're about to look at.
Okay, let's zoom in on that number 85. It's not just a random count of chapters. It also happens to be the exact chapter number for a specific surah called Al-Buruj. And believe me, this is where the connections start to get, well, really intricate.
So this brings us to a calculation that researchers have called the quadratic echo. And it starts with that other number from our split, remember? 29. Okay, so follow me here. You take the digits of 29, that's a 2 and a 9. Now you square them. So 2 squared is 4. 9 squared is 81. And what happens when you add those together? 4 plus 81, you get 85. The exact chapter number we were just talking about. It's this direct mathematical link.
But wait, it gets even deeper. That same chapter, Al-Buruj, the one that's chapter 85, it has exactly 22 verses. Now, why would the number 22 matter? Well, it immediately makes you think of the fraction 22 over 7, which is, of course, the classic approximation for pi. For the people who study this, this is huge. It's another potential layer of meaning, connecting the chapter's structure not just to other parts of the book, but to a fundamental constant of the universe itself.
All right, let's look at another example. This one's called Pola 12. It's pretty straightforward. It focuses on just the muqatta'at surahs, those special chapters that have a single-digit chapter number. And it turns out there are only 3 of them, Chapter 2, Chapter 3, and Chapter 7. And as you can see right here, if you add those chapter numbers together, 2 plus 3 plus 7, you get 12. And for researchers, the number 12 is significant in all sorts of ways, which they see as another little hint of a deliberate choice being made. But the connection doesn't just stop at adding them up. No, it goes deeper. Those exact same 3 chapter numbers, 2, 3, and 7, are used to build another, even more complex link. So, instead of adding them, what happens if we multiply them? Let's do the math. 2 times 3 is 6, and 6 times 7 is 42. So the product of these specific surah numbers gives us a totally new number, 42.
And here it is. The number 42 just so happens to be the exact chapter number of another one of those important muqatta'at surahs, a chapter called Ashura. So think about what that means. The product of one set of these special chapters points you directly to the location of another one. For the researchers, this looks like a form of deliberate numerical encoding.
Okay, so we've seen a few examples. What does it all mean? What do the researchers actually make of all this? Well, in our third section, we're going to explore the main argument they present for these patterns, the case for a divine design.
Basically, the core argument from those who support this idea is this: the patterns are just too complex. They're too interwoven to be an accident. They present this as compelling evidence that there was an intelligence behind the text structure, a design that would have been completely beyond human ability back in the 7th century.
And finding these patterns isn't just about one thing. It takes a whole mix of approaches. You've got the hard numerical analysis for sure, but there's also deep textual analysis, counting words and letters, and even using something called the abjad system. That's a traditional method where every Arabic letter has a number value. Then they mix in astronomical analysis, looking for ties to things like celestial cycles. And finally, they wrap it all in theological context, trying to make sure it all connects back to traditional interpretations.
Now, of course, not everyone buys this interpretation. It's a huge point of debate. So Section 4 is all about the other side of the coin. Are we really looking at a deliberate code? Or could this all just be one big coincidence?
Really, the whole debate comes down to these two opposing views. On one side, you have the argument for design, which says these connections are just too intricate and consistent to be random. But on the other side, you have the argument for coincidence. This view says that if you take any large set of data, and a book is a large set of data, you're statistically bound to find patterns, especially if you're using modern math to look for them. Our brains are actually wired to do this. There's even a name for it: apophenia, the tendency to see patterns where none exist.
And it's important to say that even some supporters of this research acknowledge there are some big things to consider here. First, there's the risk of cherry picking, right? Of only pointing out the numbers that fit your theory and ignoring the ones that don't. Then there's the whole question of whether it's fair to apply our modern math concepts to a 7th century text. And finally, there's a real theological concern for some, that if you focus too much on the numbers, you might lose sight of the Quran's core spiritual and moral message.
And all of this brings us to our final section, where we're going to zoom out a bit and ask a much bigger question. In our modern, data-driven world, what does a miracle even look like?
So, at the end of the day, where does this all leave us? Well, the numerical relationships we've looked at, like 2 times 3 times 7 equaling 42, those are mathematical facts. They are verifiable. You can do the calculation yourself. But their significance, what they truly mean, that's where things get blurry. That remains open to interpretation, and it's where we see this bridge between objective data and personal belief.
And that really leads us to the final big question. When we find this kind of profound, almost beautiful order in ancient texts, does it point directly to a divine architect, or does it reflect something deep inside of us? Our own innate, very human drive to find meaning, to see harmony, and to build patterns out of the world around us. It's a question that really sits at the intersection of mathematical fact and philosophical wonder. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.